My name is Alma Flor Ada. I was born in Cuba and I have lived in many places in the world. I studied in Spain. I completed my PhD and began teaching in Lima, Peru. And in the United States, I have lived in multiple states, in Colorado, Massachusetts, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Illinois, and for the longest time in California, which I call home. I began my working career as a classroom teacher, but I was very unsatisfied with the materials that I had to teach my students with. I felt that the books were dry and will not make my students be excited, engaged, in love with literature and with grammar and with the history of our language and with all the things that I thought they would appreciate it if the materials were different. So I began creating my classroom materials, never knowing at the time that they would eventually be published and that they will be the beginning of a career as an author. I had studied in the United States for a summer when I was 15 in Pennsylvania. I had done 2 years of college, one in Colorado and one in Florida, and then went to study in Spain. When I completed my PhD in Lima, I was given the extraordinary opportunity of doing postdoctoral work at Harvard University as a scholar with the Radcliffe Institute. It was really a taste of the ivory tower. I would have, after we returned to Peru, at the time I was married and had 4 children, the 4th of them born in Massachusetts, I thought I would really like to stay in Latin America. I wanted my children to grow up speaking Spanish, immersed in their culture, and I felt there was much to do in Latin America. Circumstances dictated differently, and I ended up in the United States in 1970, and I have remained here ever since. Then I realized there was much to do in the United States also, that there was a large number of Latino people as well as other minorities who had the dream of being educated, the dream of having their children receive an education better than the one they had an opportunity to have, so that their children could have a better future. And I also realized that the schools were not providing what these children needed. So I became very involved in the effort to promote bilingual education in our schools. I know the power of languages. I know the value of being bilingual and multilingual. The 2 schools in which I had taught in Lima were schools for the elite, for the children of the powerful, and of course they were bilingual one, trilingual the other one. So for me it was the most natural and better kind of education anyone could receive. This was not the general consensus in the United States, so it demanded a lot of efforts to get the first state law passed in Massachusetts. I was living in Michigan at the time, but I was very involved with the Massachusetts task force, going to Boston, knocking on doors, getting signatures from people. Then I did the same work to get the law passed in Michigan and the law passed in Illinois, and became very engaged in all the efforts to promote bilingual education. At the same time, I realized that there was a tremendous disconnection between the schools and the families, that the parents really did not understand or were given the message and the information to understand their important role in the schooling process of their children, that their attitude of great respect for the schools and staying distant and leaving the education of their children, the schooling process, rather to the professionals, was mistakenly seen as indifference and lack of responsibility and lack of commitment to their children's education. So I tried to become a spokesperson for the parents and got very much involved in speaking to communities all over the nation, and I have never stopped doing that. came to California, it was apparent that a group that was receiving the least support were the migrant families. So for a very long time, I have driven across the countryside in California. I've seen and been at the migrant camps. I have witnessed terrible conditions in which families live many times, and the multiple injustices that have been perpetrated on them. All along this process, I have been teaching at the university, trying to educate future teachers into a more transformative form of education, to more critical and reflective form of education, and for the longest time, I worked with doctoral students, people who had already been in education for many years, who had an enormous amount of experience and commitment, and that could participate in the program that I directed because they could come to an evening and weekend program while maintaining their jobs as educators. In that program at the University of San Francisco, I have been privileged to work with the most extraordinary group of human beings. Many of them are now, in turn, professors of education in many universities in California.